I like to be a resident myth buster. And so one of the things that I always use the word corporate social responsibility, but to me, the corporate part is kind of a misnomer. And so when I talk to small businesses, I always remind them that they live in a neighborhood and they live in a community and that they're part of that community. And I also point them to the research that actually suggests that those people who actually do invest in their community end up doing better. It actually saves them time and saves them money and actually could lead to higher profits.
Hi, everyone, and welcome back to Your Customer, Your Success. My guest today is Suzanne Smith. Suzanne is one of the country's most respected voices on social impact, including the future of corporate social responsibility,
Hmm.
which is the topic of today's show. Suzanne is the founder and CEO of Social Impact Architects, a nationally recognized consulting firm that helps companies, nonprofits, and governments design solutions that sit on the intersection of purpose and performance. She's also the author of Social Trendspotter, the top social sector blog on Substack, a TEDx speaker, and a professor who teaches social entrepreneurship, CSR, and ethical leadership at UT Austin and Duke. Her work blends data, storytelling, and real world frameworks and examples from Fortune 500 boardrooms to small businesses trying to make a difference in their own neighborhood. Suzanne, welcome to Your Customer, Your Success.
Thank you so much, Gary. I'm so excited to be here. I've been looking forward to this all month.
I have been looking forward to it as well. I always marvel at how much my guests do. It's like I get tired just thinking of all that you all do. It's amazing. So this is going to be, be a conversation on CSR. And what I wanted to do is kind of frame this conversation right. And a lot of times I think people think about it in terms of big companies, right? And I think we want to talk maybe a little bit about expanding that kind of thought process around CSR. So we're going to talk about small businesses to start. So when you talk
Yeah.
to small business owners, right, about CSR, I assume a lot of them say, we don't have the resources, the budget, or the time. Is that correct? And what do you say to them?
So I like to be a resident myth buster. And so one of the things that I always use the word corporate social responsibility, but to me, the corporate part is kind of a misnomer because to me, social responsibility has been with business from the very beginning of the origin of business in the US and other countries. And, neighbors helping neighbors, and that really was kind of the origin story of business. And so when I talk to small businesses, I always remind them that they live in a neighborhood and they live in a community and that they're part of that community. And I also point them to the research that actually suggests that those people who actually do invest in their community end up doing better. And so it doesn't cost more time and money. It actually saves them time and saves them money and actually could lead to higher profits. And they're fairly stunned because they typically think that it's going to be something where it's an extra that they're going to have to do rather than a value add that actually helps them perform better when it comes to customers and employees. So
Eh,
it's equally
It,
important for Fortune 500 companies as it is for small businesses.
Yeah, and I think I fall into that bucket too of kind of making a broad generalization that it's some big
Yeah.
corporate expensive program, right?
Hmm.
And it doesn't have to be, right? So, can you maybe start the conversation by saying maybe talk about a low cost, high impact initiative that you've seen a small business implement that made a difference, right? So people can kind of picture this.
Yeah, absolutely. And my favorite story is I was at a session at Southern Methodist University in my local town of Dallas. And there was a guy who owned a franchise of oil change companies. And he came up to me afterwards and he's like, how do I do this? Essentially, I'm in a commodity business and oil chain is an oil change is an oil change. And I said, well, that's perfect for you because in the commodity business, you actually need to find ways to differentiate yourself. And so I said to him, I said, well, let's just choose one of your businesses where you have a great store manager. And so we found one and we found a local after school program that was right down the street. And so all he did was essentially volunteer to do in-kind oil changes for their van, because obviously they have to transport kids to and from school and then to home as well. So transportation was a big cost for the after school program. And the employees loved it. They thought it was so much fun because they got to connect with the kids, they got to connect with the organization. Meanwhile, over time, the store manager went even farther and actually, in addition to the oil changes, they got various companies around that area to then donate tires, donate all the different things that that van was actually going to need, and actually then went to the after school program and taught the kids auto mechanics. So, like intro to auto mechanics. And eventually, the store manager actually ended up hiring some of the young people in the after school program to actually work for that organization. And every giving day, they also put up pictures and encourage people to donate to that after school program. And so they have become all in. And what they would say is that it has not only allowed them to better connect to their community because people are coming to that oil change place and saying, I'm coming back because I see you deeply care about this community. And while I'm sitting around waiting for my oil change to be done, I get to see pictures of you guys. I get to see videos. I get to see what's going on. And they have built loyalty among customers in that area as a result of being so deeply connected to that program. Interestingly enough, that owner, I just recently ran into him and he's actually serving on the board of that after school program now. And he is the biggest advocate for after school programs. And so it's just a great example of where you just start small and build. It doesn't have to be anything that is dramatic, but over time you really see the connection point. And then also, and we've talked about this before, it also means that the employees who are volunteering get the helpers high where they're helping young kids. And so it is meaningful to them as well. And so it's just, to me, this great multiplier that you can do as a small business. And it doesn't cost a whole lot more. It actually ends up helping you in the long run.
Yeah. Oh, that's brilliant. I absolutely love that. Not only because my wife runs after school programs, but,
Yes.
but that is a brilliant, just a brilliant way of resetting the discussion, right? Because I
Hmm.
think I've worked for big companies and I still have that mindset of what this is all about, but it doesn't have to be. And to really think through that, and then to get the kids involved with the business is even
Hmm.
better, right? Because
Hmm.
I think, and I was just telling you, my son as a teenager, he's going to high school next year. We had a kind of a pre-meeting introduction to the high school,
Uh-huh.
parents' night and everything, and went through everything they do there, and it includes all that great stuff. That there's automotive stuff, and they will train the
Yeah.
kids to be mechanics, or if they want to go to college, they're going to go through the STEM and the math and this. And so, getting them involved in that kind of real world applicable stuff is just absolutely great for them. So I
Well,
love that
and to your
story.
point, that's an easy start. I mean,
Right.
any business has a school nearby. And some of those businesses can have those individuals as customers,
Right.
so starting and adopting a local school could be one of the easiest ways that businesses give back.
Right. And then it's just right. It's the visibility for the business right now. I
Hmm.
coach obviously, so all the businesses support
Hmm.
the little leagues and all that
That's right.
stuff. But you see, that just a local small drugstore that's always been supporting the teams and everything. And I just feel like I know they support our teams, and so I'm much more likely to go in there than the big chain drugstore and stuff. So
That's exactly right.
so
Yeah.
this is super interesting because, like, again, I think of that big structure. So
Hmm.
so a little bit more of kind of the right way to do this is there I don't know how to put this, but I guess that's a super small one, like a real community impact, but maybe if you
Hmm.
take a step up, are there other kind of models that you could share that you can think of? I know it's very generic. It's going to depend on the business, maybe, which is the right answer for a CX podcast. But what else? What other kind of models can you share with people to kind of get that mindset thinking in the right direction?
Yeah. So in my CSR class, and when I talk with corporations specifically, one of the things I talk to them about is kind of moving it away from kind of checkbook philanthropy, or CSR being connected to PR, and really having a much more holistic strategy for the organization. And so I have a 4C framework that I really get them connected to. One is connected to your core. So something that fits your DNA. So hopefully it's connected to something that is your core competency as an organization. So the example I like to give is Toyota. Toyota does a lot of work in their local communities where they operate, and they are experts on Kaizen, and so they go in and help local food banks be more efficient. Um, there's lots of other examples of that, but to me, anytime you're going into your community and you're leveraging your core talent, that can be a really beneficial thing. The other is concrete. So a lot of people will do scattershot approaches, so the big checks, they'll write the big checks to a bunch of people. But the problem with writing a big check to a lot of people is that you can't ever connect it back to something concrete. So I recommend people picking one or two things and then do it really well and going at a deep level with that. So choosing one or two different charitable areas. Many corporations or small businesses can actually use their employees and have their employees vote on issues that they want to focus on. Some organizations on an annual basis will turn over who they're going to focus in on, but making it something very concrete where it's not just checkbook, it's they're also, volunteering in that same cause and it's directly connected to employee wishes. Then be clear and humble. I think sometimes corporations will come in and businesses will come in and they'll want to, preach and kind of be really engaged versus partnering with nonprofits. So bringing in the people who are experts and allowing them to be experts and working alongside them. And then just like anything else, continuous improvement. So learn, adapt, repeat. So what did you learn from the experience? What was the most impactful to your employees? Where did they like volunteering? And then repeating that. So we've worked with lots of different organizations of all different sizes. And I would say that's the formula that we've found that has staying power. And no matter if they're in a high or a low when it comes to their profitability, they consistently say this is something that they would never change, that is now part of their DNA and part of their strategy.
So yeah, so there's a frame. I love it. So you got a 4C strategy.
Hmm.
Awesome. It's definitely sounds like that's something applicable to companies of all sizes. Yep.
Yeah. Hmm.
So what's can you give me the range? What is the kind of the smallest client you've worked with versus the largest? I want everybody to get a sense of you could do this kind of thing no matter who you are, right?
Yeah, no, I would agree. And Social Impact Architects has companies, government, and nonprofits as clients, but we're also what's called a benefit corporation. So we do a whole lot of outreach where there isn't necessarily a client involved. So the person who runs the franchise, he's not necessarily a client. I was just suggesting to him that he can, consider some of these different things. And to me, kind of connecting the dots between nonprofits who are in the community who are doing good and businesses and kind of being that matchmaker is like one of my favorite things to do. And then they let things organically come together. So, but I've worked with, micro organizations and, people who are small businesses and startups really think about how they embed it into their DNA. I've done a lot of business plan competitions recently, and I would say about 65% of new businesses actually have some type of social imprint where they are thinking about how they're sourcing their materials and trying to be ethical. They're looking at living wage of their employees. They're looking at a number of different things. And so I would say even the startups are actually really embedding this in their DNA. And then large corporations, so there's large corporations who will come to me and say, we really want to make, a bigger impact, or we want to do an employee giving campaign that encourages people to serve on boards or to give back to their community. I actually recently did a session for Jackson and Walker, which is a law firm here locally, and they were just trying to figure out how to better help their employees, give back to their communities, or develop ERGs, employee resource groups, around specific topics. And so there's a wide range of things we can help companies with.
Interesting stuff. So I think sometimes people get a little concerned with these projects, these initiatives with maybe the larger companies because perhaps they're not implemented correctly, right?
Right.
So let's talk a little about where some of these things go wrong, so we don't make
Mm.
those mistakes. Um, I
Yeah.
think sometimes. Well, you tell me. What are the signs that the initiative is kind of sliding out of the authentic into I'm doing it just to do this, right? To say I'm doing this kind of thing.
Right. Well, it's interesting because I've been doing this now for, over 20 years. And, early on when corporate social responsibility got started, it was all feel good. And it was very much connected to PR and marketing. So now that it's been more embedded in their supply chain and it's been more embedded in employee giving, I think that we're seeing that it's not just in one department, it's in multiple departments, which means one of the things we have recommended to our clients is really to have a chief impact officer who's really looking at all of these things because, as you've talked about in your broadcast multiple times, transparency is really important. And in addition to customers choosing to choose a brand because they are aligned with social causes, they will also punish brands if they feel like they're not being authentic. And the classic case study of this, which most people know about, is the 2017 Pepsi ad with the Kardashian Kendall Jenner. And essentially, you may remember there was a Pepsi can that was passed to a police officer, and people felt like it was anti Black Lives Matter. And it really created a huge amount of issues for Pepsi as well as Miss Jenner. And so it was a great example of where something that was totally feel good and people assumed was going to be a good thing to do just was completely tone deaf. And so part of what we're noticing now in these last 5 years, as polarization has happened, as more and more people are demanding transparency, as Gen Z are on the scene and actually more in the consumer mindset, we actually really are seeing people holding brands accountable
Hmm.
for what they're saying. And so that they can't just say they're doing something, they have to have what my students call receipts. Like they actually have to do this thing. And Pepsi, just as one example, they obviously apologized, they pulled the actual ad, but it's estimate that they lost over $2 billion because of that ad.
2 billion with a
And
B.
because they with a B over time. And there's some people who believe that they lost a lot of people preferring Pepsi, because as you know, customer preference is really important. And so there were a lot of people who said, I won't drink Pepsi anymore because of this. And so, again, there's lots of, estimates associated with that. They also followed it up with a goodwill tour, and they've done a number of things to resuscitate the brand, obviously. And it was a while back, but people still remember that ad. I mean, it was the epic fail of 2017. And so I think brands now are paying attention more than they ever have been and recognizing that they could also get punished if they don't do the right thing. We've seen recently the Target example with kind of the polarization of the LGBTQ community. And so I think the Target brand is still trying to resuscitate its brand. And so part of what I have said, just even in my time span of teaching this course, it's gone from completely feel good to you've got to really pay attention to what you're putting out there in the social space and almost have experienced professionals working on it to make sure that you don't unintentionally stub your toe on a social issue that could be problematic. And so from my perspective, I think it's even more important. I think I was sharing with you that CSR budgets are increasing as a result. More and more CSR professionals in organizations are gaining influence and visibility. They used to be relegated to the marketing department or the philanthropy department, but now they're part of bigger decisions that the company is actually making. And CSR investments are actually increasing as well because people recognize that companies who invest in corporate purpose do things in the community actually have a higher revenue and higher profitability if they do it correctly. So it's actually been a really interesting time for CSR, and I think it's kind of professionalizing the industry in many ways.
And that's fascinating, and that's what I want to. I want to get into so many things you just said there, but I also want to get into the
Yeah.
kind of what impact are we having, right? And what impact does it have on your clients and your retention? And you just obviously stated a huge kind of
Hmm.
oops that impacted the bottom line, but it also has an impact on your employees. So one of the reasons I
Hmm.
wanted to talk about this is the employee experience is always tied
Yep.
into the client experience, customer experience, and the whole experience that your firm is having. Because I feel this is such an interesting topic because which way do you go? I don't I don't know about these things, right? That you delve into. Certainly, I think through these things, but do you go apolitical? Do you go not like because you can get the polarization out there is pretty fierce,
Right.
and you
Hmm.
want everybody wants to do good, but I guess we don't agree all the time on how we do the good. So
What is good? Yeah. Hmm.
what is good? So what do you do?
I think this is where I would say focus on your core and figure out kind of where you want to play in this space. Example I would give in my hometown community here in Texas, we've got a grocery store brand called HEB, and I think they do a really great job. And as an example, as soon as the shutdown happened and they recognized the actual strain on food banks, They did a number of things to try to get as much food at food banks as possible. They encouraged their employees to go donate at the food banks because they knew that volume was going to get a lot higher. And they even donated to food banks proactively. And so to me, that's a good example of being proactive. And to what I have found, and there have been a number of CSR programs that have tilted to your point, but the CSR programs that were embedded in the DNA of the organization, they haven't changed
Hmm.
because it was so part of their core. Um, so I do think it's a time for corporations to reflect on their values, reflect on what's important to them. To your point about employees, I think employees are demanding it. People are deciding which companies they want to work for because they're aligned with their values or purpose or not. They also want to be engaged in things other than just their job. And keep in mind, even giving back to your community can be team building.
Yeah.
And so there can be ways that you actually embed it in your leadership and your team building exercises. So I think there's a lot of value add to corporate social responsibility more than just PR.
Yeah, it's such an interesting question, right? So, let's talk a little bit more about that customer experience and the employee
Hmm.
experience and that retention, because we all have to deal with the reality of talking to somebody in a C-suite or a CFO or somebody like that about the actual implications of it. Why
Hmm.
should we care? Now, we care because we're nice people and we this is a great thing to do and the right thing to do. But what results do you see from it within
Hmm.
the company as terms of client retention and employee experience and retention? Because I think the numbers I'm hoping are going to be probably more impressive than people think.
Yeah. Well, the research is really clear that consumers believe that business should be a force for good. So they should be in communities. They should be, invested in communities. And the vast majority of consumers out there are picking products based on what they're seeing on packaging, what they're seeing in advertising. And there's even apps that you have right now where you can compare and contrast different groups. In fact, in my class, the last class that they do is they call it Battle of the Brands, where they have Coke versus Pepsi, Marriott versus Hilton. And they actually are looking at, to what degree is their CSR strategy, smoke and mirrors, or is it truly who they are? And it's interesting because that generation, Gen Z, is very discerning in that they want it to be truly part of who you are.
Mhm.
Um, and then as you look at them as employees, they're actually asking questions of the employers saying, here's what I see in your CSR report. And 90% of Fortune 500 companies are saying it. Is this really what you're doing? And how do I help you make better choices as a corporation? And so there even are really good studies that say Gen Z will actually take a little bit of a pay cut to work for a company that actually they believe has greater social good as a result. And so they'll
Interesting.
take that trade off because they want companies that are more aligned with their values. And so it's been an interesting time. Interestingly enough, the groups that I oftentimes were talking to were the marketing people. Now I'm getting phone calls from the HR departments because they're now getting questions from the employees or the prospective employees asking about their CSR strategy, asking about their values, asking about, a number of different things. And so they've got to have good answers to those questions.
Yeah, I would think that's interesting. I would think it was always kind of driven more by HR than marketing because I think if it's just marketing, so to speak, I'm
Hmm.
oversimplifying. If it's just marketing, that's when you run into the problem of is it really genuine
Yeah.
or is it just marketing to say we're going to do this, right? Interesting. So is i- let's go back to the employees willing to take a pay cut. That is absolutely stunning to me that there's actually really do you is that across large and small, or was that kind of a mixed study, or is there multiple studies?
So, there's been multiple studies that have talked about millennials and now Gen Zers saying that as they look at different companies, they're willing to take a pay cut if they feel like the organization has a stronger social and environmental record. And as I talk to my students, and this is a sample size of 50, their view is that that company is gonna treat them better.
uh,
That if
mhm.
they, that it's a holistic view of if if they care about the environment, if they care about people, if they're, thinking about child labor, for example, if they're trying to work for a multinational global company and that company has a standard around child labor, then they can't care about child labor, but then not care about their labor workforce in the United States. They're going to have better benefits as a result. And so I think they see it as proxies in many
Yeah.
ways of this is how you're going to treat me as an employee if you truly care. Am I just a widget to you that is going to do a purpose, or am I going to actually, or do you actually feel strongly that I'm part of your success? Um, and
That
so, and
yeah,
it's
that
not
makes
all
total sense.
students. I think particularly students that are going into consumer packaged goods, students that are going and working for Nestle or Nike or, organizations that are putting out a product. I think they're probably more attuned to that because they want to make sure that the products that they're behind, they're putting their personal stamp and their personal seal on them, to their friends, to other people. So I think that's important to them. So from my perspective, I not only see the evidence of that kind of in the academic journals, but I also see that in my own classroom.
Yeah, that makes a ton of sense actually. Very very interesting stuff. So, what about the customer retention aspect of it? Do you have any tangible results on customer retention, churn, customer engagement, customer lifetime value, anything like that?
Yeah, so I think that customers in general are paying more attention to, what's on the box, and that's one of the reasons why you now see all of these third-party labels, that can go on there. But they're also paying attention to, how the brand is actually talking about themselves, so what they're saying in their commercials. And so those are all signals that the customer actually gets. But to your point, and what I've seen in the conversations you guys have had in the podcast previously, the one with Brooke in particular, it has to be consistent.
Hmm.
So if they say they're doing social good, but then they're being treated poorly as a customer, they can't get someone on the phone, or they're putting something on social media because they're having a problem and they can't get anywhere, then it's game over. It doesn't
Hmm.
matter, you can't assume that just because someone's doing social or environmental work, but then they treat their customers poorly, that customer is going to continue.
Right.
So the research that I did is that the social part is still in third place in comparison to quality and cost. And so they're still looking at quality and cost pretty strongly. And then the social part is kind of like if quality and cost is the same, and some people will even pay a little bit of a premium for social stuff if quality and cost are the same, then they will decide that this is the brand that I'm going to be paying attention to. And as I mentioned in the oil change business, as an example, in the commodity business, that's really important
Yeah.
because, as you know, the quality and the cost is sometimes indistinguishable to a customer, and they're pretty much the same. And so that socials part can be a really big brand boost.
Right. It's an ingredient well, I'll put it this way. It's an ingredient in the gravy.
Yes, Thanksgiving
That's
is right around the corner, so we're talking
but
about gravy and turkey and all of that.
but no, seriously, that's so right. So it's an ingredient too. Now I have this experience in my background is with government contracts and government
Uh-huh.
pension funds, state pension funds. So believe me, I know the rigor that they put their vendors through to
Oh
go through
yeah.
the process and then just one to go through the process and win the business. But then after that, there's the documentation and the legal documentation of signing the contracts, and I've
Mm-hmm.
lived it, right? So I know.
Yeah.
And then not only that, there's the compliance. So you've won
Mm-hmm.
the business, you've gone through the RFP. Now you've got to put the legal document together, and then you've got to complete your compliance every year to say
Mm-hmm.
you're really doing those things that you said you were doing. And in a big company, it's not that simple. So I've definitely lived the client aspect of this part of the business for sure, and it is extremely important in investment management, investment servicing. So I can
Mm-hmm.
definitely empathize with that. That is for sure. Okay, we got time for one more question before we hit the segment, Suzanne. I want to talk about
Bring
your
it on.
TEDx talk. Right, you
Oh
had a
yeah.
TEDx talk. It is titled "Everyone Can Be a Change Maker." So for the small business owner listening who feels maybe overwhelmed, tired, got too much to do. Where do they start, right? What is a meaningful step they can take to begin this process if they want to get more involved and get their business more involved in these great initiatives?
So I would start small and build. So a couple of things that I would recommend is besides the adopting a school, adopting an after school program nearby, I would also encourage you to take a poll of your employees and say, what's something we can do together? And maybe it's something significant to one person, so maybe they have been touched by a health condition, a family member has been touched by a health condition, and you decide to do a health walk together. Maybe it is that people want to do a coat drive. They see a lot of people walking into their business and they don't have proper coats. But my guess is that your employees probably have something that lights them on fire, that sparks them. And maybe it's one employee and that sparks everybody. But I would just encourage you to kind of talk to your employees and say, we really want this to be employee driven. And that way, if the owner is tired, and I'm an owner myself, and so I get tired as well, to turn it over to your employees, people who maybe have a little bit more chutzpah, and say, "What do you guys want to do? Let's every year, let's turn this over." And I do that to my employees too. We pick a couple of community projects that we want to be a part of, and they're either for nonprofits or government, or it could be a combination, a coalition, and we turn it over and we basically say, what do we want to work on this year? What's going to be our pro bono projects? So I would turn it over to your employees and find something that they would enjoy being a part of. Build it into your team building, so that it's your opportunity to kind of get people to get to know each other a little bit better. And then I would connect it to customer. So really telegraphing to your customers, here's what we're doing to give back to the community in a true and authentic way. And it could just be a bulletin board with a bunch of pictures, or it could be a thermometer where they can actually round up and they can donate to this cause as well. Since point of sale is so much easier now and you could do a roundup campaign pretty easily. So I would just start small, ask your employees, and then, just continue to keep asking the question around what more can we be doing to support that cause.
Yeah, that is great advice because absolutely your employees are going to have great ideas, and
Hmm.
I've seen it, I've lived it, and we've done things around the community around the holidays in the companies I've worked at and really made an impact. So it is absolutely wonderful advice and a great way to get things going.
Hmm.
Awesome. Let's hit the segments.
Okay.
All right, it is time for Does It Hold Water? My favorite segment. This
Mm.
is where I ask my guest to be our resident expert witness for the day. Channel your inner Mona Lisa Vito, as it will.
Okay.
And I'm going to ask you a question or read a piece of thought leadership from the defense, and you'll let me know if it holds water and why not. And obviously, sometimes we hit the topics before I get to these questions. I prepare them. You do not, our guests do not know the does it hold water
That's right.
question beforehand. And we sometimes hit the topic, and I had two prepared and we hit both the topics, but I'm going to go back to the big one. So the defense
Okay.
today, Suzanne, says it's just a simple statement. CSR is risky in today's polarized environment.
So I do think it's risky if you are doing it inconsistently or in an inauthentic way. And so to me, this is why you have to make sure CSR is part of your embedded strategy and not about just PR. So CSR is more than PR. If it is just about PR, it probably will be risky, and I would encourage you not to do anything. But if you do it and you do it wholeheartedly and you do it with intention, I think it's actually not risky at all.
Right. Absolutely wonderfully put, because I think that's where the trouble comes in and the polarization
Uh-huh.
comes in because you're not genuine. You're just saying it's almost, it's the word I'm looking for. Um, Almost virtue signaling in a sense. Look at how great and virtuous we are. And it's not true and consistent to what your brand or your company is, and you get yourself in trouble. Is that kind of on the spot
Yeah,
or
well, and I think there is a such thing as greenwashing, or whitewashing. I also think silence can also erode trust.
Mm.
So when you're silent on something that you should actually be out there talking about, people also notice that too. And so, to be honest, I think it's riskier to not do something. And this is why having really good people helping you figure it out from a strategy perspective, I think is going to be more important today than it ever has been.
I absolutely agree because this is absolutely a fascinating topic that you can go on with
Hmm.
all day. And, I don't have a ton of expertise in it, but I do have a little bit of that background, like I was talking to you before,
Yeah.
working with governments. But I think through these things all the time. What would I do? How would I do this? And well, maybe is that risky? Is gonna be careful. And what is this company doing?
Mm.
Oh my God, what did they do? But you're right. Sometimes it's what do they not do? Right. So it's the silence is not always golden. Very interesting stuff. Okay, let's move to chip shots. All right, it is time for chip shots. Chip shots are our fun yet still professional questions, a little bit more conversational, a little bit shorter form. We try to go with three or four, time permitting, and we always start, Suzanne, with the book question. We got a great book list going. What is one book that has significantly influenced your professional, personal life, and how did it impact you?
So I would absolutely say Dan Ariely's book, Predictably Irrational. So, quick behind the scenes story. I was in business school and I had a market research professor, John Lynch, who I was his research assistant. He's like, you've really got to take this new class by Dan Ariely. And it was called Behavioral Economics. And I was like, I've got enough of economics. Like, I'm okay. And then so I ended up taking his class because I trusted John. And it was one of my favorite classes by far at Duke. He's still at Duke. He's written many books. In fact, they've actually put a television show out about his life. So it's fictionalized, but it's based on his life. And I just encourage anybody to delve into behavioral psychology. I think that it not only impacts social change, which is where I use it and I teach, but it also really impacts marketing, and why we do what we do and why human beings actually are not, we're not rational creatures. We're actually predictably irrational creatures. So, Predictably Irrational or any one of his books are a fabulous read.
That's great because I've got into kind of the behavioral stuff myself. I did a solo episode where I talked about kind of the ocean philosophy,
Hmm.
the personality stuff, because I've always loved the disc profiles and things like
Hmm.
that. And I've had other guests recommend books on that. Chris Woders recommend about 7 different psychology books. Chris, it's one book, seven. But he recommends 7 of them, and I think what it's Surrounded by Idiots is one of them. It's
Oh, yeah.
absolutely, and I'm actually listening to it now. I downloaded it, and it's fascinating because I'm on it. If you listen to it, I'm a green. I'm totally a green. And
Hmm.
yeah, I've worked with a lot of reds in the C-suite level,
Yep.
and
Hmm.
it's interesting to think through. That's interesting. There were so many reds that only kinda hired greens, but anyway, so if you don't know the asset I'm sorry, the people types, you don't know what I'm talking about, but bottom line is that is super interesting stuff, and, if you're into that kinda stuff, that's another great suggestion for you. Good for you,
It
thank you.
is. I love that.
Okay, I love to ask the leader question, so if you can
Mm.
spend a day chatting with a current real life leader or professional in any industry, who would it be, and what would you hope to learn?
So hands down, I would choose Oprah. And not probably why people would think that I would choose Oprah. I mean, she's just a cool person to be around. But I think she has really great instincts about what is now versus what is next.
Mm,
And so, since I kind of consider myself a futurist, and really, I think there are a number of things that we're trying to wrestle with as a society right now, I'd be so interested in hearing about her perspective on those, not just as a journalist, but someone who I consider as like a futurist.
mhm. Oprah is, by the way, a green also, or is she a yellow? I don't know, but
Yeah.
I was just that was in the book this morning.
I'm definitely agreeing. I
You're agree
totally
yeah.
agree with you. I love that personality assessment as well.
I think she was a yellow, I forget, but it was actually in the book I was listening to this
Mm.
funny, that's so funny, but she is such an interesting person with e everything she's built. I mean, not
Oh
only the
yeah.
success she's had and the lives she's touched, but, the organizations that she's built and just from a business perspective, it's very
Oh
interesting, and then
yeah.
obviously she's
Oh
very
yeah.
driven in many different ways, but she knows everybody? I mean,
Hmm.
right? So how interesting would
Well,
that be?
and it's a great example of where she's philanthropically oriented too.
Right,
And
exactly.
it's been from the very beginning. I think she has leveraged her platform as an opportunity to do social good. So she does the 4 C's. What we were talking about, it's connected to her core,
Mm.
very concrete. She's been very consistent with the things she gives back to. So I think she's a good example of quality CSR.
Oh, yeah, makes total sense for you. Brilliant. Absolutely interesting.
Mhm.
Awesome. Okay. If you had to delete every social platform but one, which stays and why?
one was a tough one for me because family is all about Facebook. And so I follow my family over Facebook, so that would be hard. But I would definitely say LinkedIn would be the only one I would keep. To me, it's kind of the place where ideas and kind of meritocracy still matters. And so to me, I think LinkedIn is still the most authentic one for me.
Yeah, interesting. Now I've added this is a new one, folks. So I've only asked this to Brooke Sellis and now
Uh-huh.
Suzanne, but I'm just keeping it because I think the default is going to be
Uh-huh.
for anybody on this program. It's going to be LinkedIn,
That's
but
right.
the point of it is to make you think. Well, if you get rid of it, now you got Facebook for the family. I'm the same way. It's like all right, the family and kids and baseball and soccer is all on Facebook, but then I lived on
Well,
LinkedIn day and
and
night.
Facebook is also my high school reunion situation too. Like
Yeah,
everybody I know
yeah.
that is in when I went to high school and college with, I live
Hmm.
vicariously through them, and they don't really follow me professionally on LinkedIn,
Hmm.
so it'd be a lot harder. So that this one was a tough one for me, but if I had to choose, I would choose LinkedIn.
Okay. Well, good luck with your 10th high school reunion. If all right, one more. What is one professional risk that you took that has really paid off?
So I started Social Impact Architects in the height of the Great Recession, and so people said that was very risky. But I think starting it, 6 years later, knock on wood, it's still around. And this was when the movement to the middle, so that's the expertise that I bring to this is how do nonprofits become more entrepreneurial? How do businesses become more socially oriented? How does government get that much more innovative? And so this was a very new concept. And so I kind of started it out before people really understood what this meant. And so it was very personally risky for me financially, but it has definitely paid off.
Wow, I didn't see. Now I didn't realize that. Right now, I obviously didn't ran your business, but I didn't realize you started that during the financial crisis and all the
Yeah.
fallout thereafter. And oh my gosh, that just to think of that, that was a that is a crazy time. But you're right. That is when a lot of this kind of took off, I guess. So
Yeah.
in a way, your timing was perfect. Other than yeah, you're
Hmm.
starting a business in the middle of a recession when everybody's tanking and corporates checkbooks are not coming out quite as frequently
Hmm.
as you wish. It was that was bad. I got to tell you that living through financial services and the kind of downfall of I should say the downfall, the after effects of that financial crisis was probably one of the toughest things professionally I've had to go through. It
Oh
was
yeah.
it was an
Well,
ugly
I
scene.
mean, I had some folks that are in my business school who their jobs were rescinded during that time frame.
Yeah.
you know so so it was a tough time, and so at first, for those of us who have a more gray hairs than others, while people think right now is tough, I still think the Great Recession in 2008, that was pretty tough, and there was a lot of fallout there, so I think, again, it just goes to show that we have a lot of resiliency in the United States, and if you have good ideas and you pursue them with excellence, you can make things work.
And let me tell you, and now I don't want to bore anybody to tears with investment talk, but what I will never forget about that situation was cash and the cash
Oh
crunch.
yeah.
People don't really understand it, but in the investment world, clients keep cash in their portfolios, and it goes in something called a cash sweep, and it's just a treasury note fund with treasury bills and maybe some commercial paper.
Mhm.
But there were things that were failing and tanking, and that was locking up cash, and that was part of the
Mhm.
problem was the liquidity was drying up. In other words, your oil in your engine was gone and your engine was seizing
Mhm.
kind of thing, right? So that's what was happening from a cash perspective. And you never thought of like clients couldn't get out of their cash vehicle. And it was
Mhm.
absolute craziness. But wow, you took a risk in it and it sure as heck paid off. Awesome. Suzanne Smith, absolutely wonderful guest. Such an interesting topic. A little bit of a deviation from what I usually do, but that's what I like to do. I like to bring it all together
Uh-huh.
and kind of point it all towards that overall experience. And you've done a wonderful job presenting this topic to the audience. Thank you so much for being on today. But before we go, please let everybody know where they can find you in your many different roles and forms.
Yeah, absolutely. So, company is Social Impact Architects, and you can find us on our website. If you want to learn more about my background, I also have a website called meetsuzanne.com. We mentioned LinkedIn, also Substack. My Substack is called Social Trendspotter. And then next year, I'll also be launching a TikTok channel as well. So you can follow me at any place that you prefer to follow folks.
Wow, TikTok. Interesting.
Mhm.
Okay, I still will not be dancing on TikTok, Kelly Shuknick. Thank you. And you're a speaker. You got to be an unbelievable speaker too. So thank you, Suzanne, so much. I appreciate it. This has been a great episode. Thank you all for joining Your Customer, Your Success. Again, we're almost at the 1 year mark. I'm going to try my best to get a 1 year retrospective out to you all soon.
Yeah.
But until then, I have a whole bunch of great guests coming your way. I'm going to do some job search stuff for you all out there and get back to the basics, yes, customer success stuff that really drives the show. That's all for today. I appreciate your continued watching and viewing. Please drop us a line. Engagement, question, comments, all welcome. Thank you so much. That's all for today. Bye for now. That's a wrap. Thank you so much for tuning in today. We hope you found something insightful that will enhance your experiences and drive your success. If you enjoyed the episode, please leave a review and share your thoughts to help us improve the show. Don't forget to head on over to maracxhub.com for more ways to connect with me and learn more about experience management. Until next time, I'm Gary Mara, working hard for your customer and your success.